This is Full Coffers with your host, Phil and Toni Buggs from Abundant Harvest Christian Fellowship Ministries.
And this week on Full Coffers, The Journey, Part 22. All right, we're back again.
Yes, we are.
I need to have a different opening because every time we come back, I says, oh, we're back again. But anyway, I want to do something a little different before we get into where we picked up the last time. And that is, I just realized looking at some of our previous podcasts that we actually started this podcast in May of 2020. To give some context, we are recording this podcast November 23rd, 2023. We just celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday. It's Friday. And I'm thinking we've been doing this quite a long time. Now, we've taken some breaks since May of 2020 in between. I never realized, however, that this project that we've been working on would take this long. You know, I'm more of a organized individual. 1, 2, 3, let's get it done, knock it out the park, keep moving. But
Toni's world.
I like my world.
Of course you do.
It's so organized, but
So Toni.
Yeah, it is, because I'm Toni. But I just realized it's taken over 3 years, and although I know that we are turning the corner and that we will be kind of ending this probably within the next, I would say, 3 months or so, but it's just that it took longer than I thought, but I know that in God's timing, everything happened when it was supposed to happen.
And Toni's world is okay with that.
I have to be.
Hello.
So yeah, I was just thinking about that, just something to put in there. But to give the context of where we are now, we are the day after Thanksgiving, November the 23rd, I believe, 2023. And we're going to continue on as God leads us. If there's another pause in between, then we'll do it. But we know that in all that we do, our sincerest hope and prayer is that something we have said over these last 3+ years have helped someone. I mean, we're not doing this just because we like hearing ourselves talk. And there is a definite cost involved in producing a podcast. It ain't free. But we wanted to do this to help believers out there who struggle with real life situations. And we had started out when we were dating, and here we are now. You're getting ready to have a birthday on November the 27th, 2023, and you'll be how old?
I'll be 63.
63. And on January 8th, 2024, I will be celebrating 60 years on this planet.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Starting in 78 as kids.
Yeah.
And look at us 40-something years later as a couple and married.
Yeah.
In the 40-year range as well, or in the 40s.
Yeah, exactly.
Range, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it's our prayer that whatever God has led us to speak on this podcast, that it will touch someone to say, hey, I know that I am a child of God and that God has equipped me to handle these things because I'm listening to these people and they are believers, never strayed from the word, and they are continuing on. So that's our prayer.
Mistakes and all.
Mistakes and all, because there were plenty.
Yeah, oh yeah. I think more to come. We put this out there, as Toni has said, and also to be, while this is audio, we have been inundated with reality shows over the past, 15 years?
Probably more me than you.
Well, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but to the point that the podcast is there to throw another perspective out there, because there's enough that has not been said about Christianity and believers' lives, and we just want to throw our hat in the ring to say, hey, here we are, and it does work with mistakes, with fallibility, with errors. It does work. And I gather to say that it works very well.
It does.
It's not just another opinion. And we are very deliberate in saying that. what we have found does work.
Yeah. And so, however long God has us doing the podcast, there's some other things on the horizon. It's just because we, at some point in the journey, there's other things that God has is preparing us for now, even as we speak. So, as we move on, last episode we left you with two major life events. One with our son, who confessed to his dad that he was using cocaine. He had no job, he had no place, and basically he was homeless. And so Philip had a conversation with our son about his drug habit. So I wanted Philip to kind of give us some perspective of what that conversation consisted of.
That conversation was one of our growing, just the closeness as a family, and I think the transparency that Philip felt that he needed to let me know what was going on in his life. And I think in some ways he was trying to protect me from the rabbit hole that he had fallen into. And what I did was, instead of just watching him dive down into a very dark world, I dove in with him and says, I'm coming in there and we're going to get through this. And so that was the approach I took. It wasn't a repulsed response or reaction. How could you do this? It was more so, all of us are fallen. All of us are not come ready-made or ready to eat. Each of us has a growth process to go through. And in Philip's journey, it involved this. And so Toni was prepared in terms of the vocation she was in now. I was still naive, but I had a heart to learn and to love and to commit to Philip's success, despite the mistakes he had made in his life.
And one of the things that had happened after that conversation is that I was, and I'll just admit it, I was just shocked and disappointed, and I was angry. And I said, no, he can't come home at that time. He was living on and off with Kyle, but again, because of the situation, when you have someone, and I know folks can understand this, when you have an individual in your home that is on drugs, there are several thought processes that takes place.
I agree.
One is, am I safe?
Yes.
Am I safe with this individual in my home? Number two, are my possessions safe? Because anyone who knows someone who has an addiction or has been a recovering addict, that when those impulses come, you're not in your right mind. And when that drug is calling you, you do things that under normal circumstances you wouldn't. One of them is stealing from people that you love. And that was a big concern for me when we found out that Philip was using cocaine. And so I was pretty staunch at that point. No, he's not coming home. Now, Kyle did call us because, yes, he was staying with her from time to time, but sometimes Philip's behavior was very erratic. But she did call. And so I decided, I told Philip, let me go this time. And I met Philip in our daughter's kind of area where people could sit that lived in the apartment. Now, I will say this. I needed to make certain things clear with our son. And so the infamous Louisville Slugger, even though it was a metal bat, I took with me because I didn't know what I was dealing with. When I saw our son, however, I could tell he had been out all night long sleeping on the street. He had a white T-shirt on that was dirty. His face had dirt on it. I knew he had been sleeping on the street. And from a mother's perspective, that broke my heart. But I had to remain strong because what Philip had embarked on was very, very serious. Mm-hmm. And so I said to him, if you come home, there are certain things that you have to do in order to come home. And like Philip had said, God prepared me to work at a facility in Arizona that was in behavioral health. And part of that behavioral health process was dealing with individuals who had a drug addiction. They had a sickness. And so we needed to decide how we were going to maneuver through that particular situation. I brought Philip home, and my husband, Philip Sr., met him at the door. And a conversation ensued at that point.
And that conversation involved what he would have to agree to coming in, and the obviously had an open choice to not come, but if he did come, there was strict guidelines that he would have to follow.
Exactly.
And those guidelines were developed by Toni and I will put this plug in, is that my world, my pompous, zealot world, we just pray that spirit out.
Oh, pray it away.
God had to educate me to recognize that, yes, there is a component of prayer that resonates throughout all of this. He says, but in addition to the prayer is the work that has to be done. And I am preparing Toni to help Philip get through the hard work. And that work involved things that would have to happen in the physical realm. Drug tests that would be randomly done. Toni had been used to that. Now, being in that environment, we bought several drug kits.
He lit them up, too.
Yeah, he was glowing.
And I know some people, it's like, well, how can you laugh about stuff like that? But you know what?
Yes.
Humor has its place.
It does. And so, when he first lit up, we thought it was Christmas. I mean, everything across the board was lit.
Positive, 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 positive.
So at least we had a baseline for what we're working with here. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, not that it hasn't been, we are believers that isn't used to this, but is thrown into it. And we made it. I'm going back to that, but we made it through, but we couldn't do it with just scripture alone. It's scripture and the work that had to be done, which happened every day. So we were very focused on the consistency in which we were involved with our son's rehabilitation, because she understood that even going through in the program that she was in, that people were held accountable for their actions. And that's the thing we dealt with Philip. Coming into this house, there's an accountability factor that is there. So random drug tests, going to meetings.
Yes, because we had decided he could have entered inpatient, but talking to some other professionals about Philip's situation, we agreed that we would try outpatient.
Outpatient, yeah. So that's what we did. And so the regiment was around that strategy. And so Philip did, and he consented to that.
He did. Yeah. He did. And so we immediately put the plan in action. And this is where the prayer comes in, because, again, I was in a new industry that I didn't fully understand, but I had people around me. God placed professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, directors of this program, and they guided me and Philip on how to maneuver this. And in all of that, Philip and I were both praying for our son. Lord, show me where we need to have him. Show me where he needs to be. This is where the prayer component was. And when we prayed, God opened up doors for us to talk to people.
Yes, exactly. In the plan that if I say we put in place, God was an intricate part of that plan. And in very loose terms, there was a part that we had to do, and that was stuff that we could control. And there were areas in that rehabilitation a lot of parents know that you don't have control over. In those areas, not that we didn't, but God controlled what we could not control. And God controlled our part too, but the point is, He gave us a part to do, and then He would do the other part. And that kind of partnership, and Philip had a component to play, and that is total acceptance of the plan. And that's not always easy. I believe in that complete plan. Did we all just dot I's and cross T's and we held hands and it went merry along? No. I know that there were failures during that rehabilitation and ongoing as we speak. But God has been able to always bring us back into the plan that He has for us. But it is dependent upon I use that word submission, our want to be better. And I think I'll just say it like that, not submission, not humility, even though those are more terms that you would hear. But bottom line, do you want to get better? Yes. Do what I say. Okay. That's really what it boils down to. Yeah.
And the whole process, it wasn't easy. I mean, yes, Philip had an accountability component, but sometimes, when we have to take them to meetings, the NA meetings, having to go to work all day, then you had to come home, then you had to take them to a meeting because the meetings usually last from 7 to 9 or maybe 7 to 8, pick them up, take them back. It was hard because we were tired. It was almost like having to raise a kid again.
It was.
But we had to remain consistent because Philip needed consistency.
Yes.
We couldn't lax on giving him those drug tests. We couldn't say, oh, well, okay, maybe he's okay. We won't do it tonight. No, we could not put Philip in that situation
to fail. Exactly. So so us holding him accountable actually held us accountable to be consistent in our commitment to his getting better with time. And honestly, it's no different in our own lives. I won't beleaguer that point. But in all of this, you can see that plans do work when everybody is going along with the program, and that includes failures. So when he did mess up, and I can't pinpoint a specific time, but I know Philip didn't hit the mark every time. But there was a component of do-overs. There was a point of, all right, you did say you wanted, and so there's always that it's like a shock absorber or a rubber band. You allow those tolerances as long as we're still headed in the same direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, as we were working with Philip on this, that boy said something to us, because this was like June of 2006. And we had put this regiment and this plan in place. We had been going along for about 4-6 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you know what that boy said after that?
Tell him what the boy said.
I want to go back to the Army.
I thought the boy had really lost his mind.
I said he lost some brain cells. They fried, that egg on that, this is your brain on drugs.
Any questions?
I mean, literally, he came to us one evening.
Yeah.
And he said, I'd like to try another shot at the Army. And at first I said, Philip, you were discharged.
Yeah.
They're not going to take you back.
Exactly.
And I wasn't very enthusiastic. It's like, dude, come on, let's just get through this and then figure it out afterwards.
But Philip was adamant about getting back into the Army. And so I says, I don't even know if that's possible, Phil. So he did the legwork.
He got in touch with the recruiter.
The recruiter, yep.
And Philip was very honest about his situation. The recruiter looked up his records from the last time because he didn't even make it past reception.
Nope.
So he didn't even make it to basic the last time. And in my mind, I said, this is not going to happen, and I guess in some ways I wanted to shake Philip and say, wake up, boy. Yeah, this is not going to happen.
But that's the part that God has control over. I really believe God put it in Philip's mind to do this. Because and I don't know how quick we want to flow through this, but I will say that Philip was able to actually get back into the service.
I don't know how he did it.
There were things that I know that he did in his recruiter. He worked with myself.
Yep.
And if I say real short, one of the things I learned from that recruiter when him and I would talk, he would use this phrase as I was explaining things. He would say things. He would say, "I'm tracking," And that statement has stuck with me.
If that recruiter is out there, I want to let you know, this man, everything I'm tracking.
And it really meant he understood and that he can keep going. But it was a powerful statement. But to that end, Philip did the things that his recruiter required him to do, which really had to be approved up the chain of command.
Yes.
And it was done. Philip actually went back into the
In
service.
August of 2006. Now, if that is not a miracle.
Wow. From telling us
June 2006 to August 2006.
People, that's God. That's not Tony. That's not Philip. That's not Phil Jr. That's not this. It's not this plan that we just drummed up. This is following the plan that God has. And God doesn't always reveal everything beforehand. He gives us enough to trust him and do just what he says at that time.
So in August of 2006, I can't remember exactly what time, but I remember taking Philip to the airport. It was much different than the first time. The first time we witnessed Philip get sworn in. It was a great occasion. And I found myself, when I saw him to the gate, I found myself crying pretty hard. And I was crying for two reasons. First, I was crying because I was proud of what he was able to accomplish. Mm-hmm. He put his mind to it. He got his mind right. And he did what he set out to do.
He did.
However, the other component of my crying was not knowing whether or not he was going to make it. And just that fear of him getting out there again and failing.
And that's the part where both of us had to heavily lean on. Lean on God. Says, Lord, you take care of him. And that's the portion that we have no control over, that God has full control over. But understanding he couldn't be in better hands than to be in the hands of God.
Exactly.
And so we trusted God with Philip and what he was going to be doing when he left for basic training the second time.
Exactly. And honestly, I don't think it happens like that a lot.
I don't know. And if it does, great.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that we weren't the first case. But for those out there that are looking at situations where they just don't see how it can happen, sometimes it's good not to know what you're going to have to deal with beforehand, but trusting God and giving it to him. And even as we say that, people over the airwaves, you track our history. We've been walking this walk of faith for a long time. This is not something for the newbies. And I truly don't believe God puts those who are young in the faith through these kinds of he prepares them. So for us, and us dealing with this matter at this point in our relationship as a married couple for some time, this is something that God was ready. We were ready, and God was ready for us to take this leap. And so he did.
So I sent Philip off with our blessing, and Kyle was okay. And so when Philip opened up, we talked last time about how he was uncomfortable with the status quo when it came to ministry and his calling. In fact, he used the term ministry disruption.
That's true. Now, mind you, Toni, she uses Philip. We're talking senior,
the old guy, the old man, Lord of the Manor.
Yes, because as God is forming and we're on this journey, and we've phrased these upcoming podcasts as the wilderness years, it wasn't just our children. If you notice, Toni is going through a transition in her life, and God has taken me through a transition, being a Black Baptist minister, licensed and ordained, and thought that I knew what road he was going to have me on. He completely upended my plan. And it's like sometimes God gives you these skills, and they're like sitting over somewhere and you're not using them, but you're not worried about it because you think he's going to send you this way. God never gives you fillers. He doesn't do things in your life and have you not use them. And so for me to be disrupted from the organized church environment to giving out water to homeless people, to being rejected by homeless people. I'll never forget this one guy that I tried to give water to. He says, I don't want anything. He says, just leave me alone. And that was dynamic for me because I recognize that as I serve people, what's very important is for me to ask, what do you need? Just asking them, what do they need? Don't assume that they need these things. If you want to help, ask how. And so that was very important to me. But as the ministry that God is awakening in me grew from just on the streets to us finding a building that we did some services with.
Well, I want to break in just for a minute because you're probably wondering, well, how does the wife fit in? How did I feel about all of this? And to be perfectly honest, I was excited about the possibility because I too, and it had nothing to do with Philip, but individually, I too was becoming discontented with how we were serving and how we were worshiping in terms of going to church, Sunday school, main service, 11 o'clock, as they say. If there was any other things to do during the week, the Bible study, I had done that for a number of years. And so when Philip came to me and said, the Lord is leading me in a certain direction, having had that exposure working at the behavioral health facility, looking at recovering addicts in a different mindset, I was excited about the possibility of starting a new church. I say the word church because based upon what I felt Philip was telling me that God was telling him, it was a church.
Yes, we thought that it was a church still, that maybe God had me hand out the water and bananas, and that would be my first congregation. Here it is, those Baptist terms. And we...
Well, at least you didn't give him water in a suit.
This is Phoenix. Suits were out. I recognized that soon after I got here. But to Toni's point of us understanding what God had put in us, and we didn't even know. But we went forward with the idea of serving people. I, in my core, always thought about, well, we got to get them to know Christ. We got to get them to know Christ, and didn't recognize that there's a process to that. I was still learning what that process was, which was way different from what I had been brought up in and what I had thought was the methodology. It was different, and it was never out of what Scripture tells us to do. So if I say in short, we're going to wind this one down in a little bit, but when we pick back up, I want to start off with sharing with you how that disruption looked, being taken out of the four walls of the organized church into a ministry, or into the ministry of working in the field, where now I was in the mud, I was in the mix with people who didn't understand Scripture, didn't care about how they looked when they went to church, and they had problems. At that time, the organized church wasn't prepared to handle. So when we pick up in our next podcast, I want to share a little bit more about what that looked like, and then how God even disrupted my understanding of Christianity, even from that standpoint, into a life of even giving and service more.
So until next time, we'll see you later.
This episode was produced and edited by Miss K. Simone. Cover graphics by Indefinite. Music by Miss K. Simone. So until next time, I'm Phil Bugs.
And I'm Toni Bugs.
Wishing you a wonderful week.